So I realize a lot of people do not understand Bitcoin because they don't understand the problem that it fixes. You need to understand our broken money system and why it is made the way it's made. You know how people say, oh, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer? That's actually a design by default. So you need to understand who creates the money and what steps go into that. You need to know who the US Treasury is and the Federal Reserve. So the US Treasury are basically like America's bank account, right? So they're responsible for collecting our taxes, and then they spend that money that they collect from us in order to fund government services and programming like the military, fixing the roads, wars, you name it, they fund it. Now you need to know the Federal Reserve. They probably have the most important job in our country, and they're not even part of our government. The Federal Reserve are basically the people responsible for our monetary policies. What that means is that they will set interest rates, they will work closely with banks, and they're responsible for our money supply. So this is how it all works, starting from the beginning. The US Treasury borrows money. They need to borrow money because they spend more than what they collect. And that's funny because it feels like taxes are always being collected and it's always more than the year before, right? But that's another conversation. When our government, the US Treasury, needs to borrow money, they'll go to other people, so like big banks, foreign governments, the Federal Reserve, and they'll be like, hey, I'm willing to sell you something called the IOU, which is a governmental bond that basically says, I promise to pay you back the money that I borrow with interest, right? So usually one of those big three will take those bonds and buy them, and then the process begins. Let's say that the Treasury sells bonds to the Federal Reserve, right? So now the Federal Reserve is the one responsible for creating that money. This is why people say that they create money out of thin air. So now the Federal Reserve will go on their computers and they will put in random numbers that they could do this forever and ever. Nobody could stop them. They'll put in random numbers and create more money. And now that money is added into the money that already exists. Now it's added into the overall supply. The more money that they create, the less valuable the money in your pockets become. That's what you call inflation. You're creating money that didn't exist before and you're adding it to money that already exists. So when that happens, the money in your pocket becomes worth less and you're able to buy less. This then causes a trickle effect to have prices going up. So you're probably wondering, there's new money that gets created. Who gets it first? I'm glad you have that question because it's not me or you. By the way, this is called the cantillon effect. The new money that gets created goes to the wealthiest people first. Who are those people? The US government, the big banks in Wall Street, and corporations. The US government takes that money and they fund wars, they fund bailing out banks or certain companies, and programming for services like I said before. So like healthcare, education, military, things like that. Banks in Wall Street get that money at a super low interest rate. So they use it to lend out to other people, and then they also invest it. They end up getting very, very, very rich off of that. Large corporations get to take out loans for cheaper with that new money. They get to invest it in real estate. They get to invest it into stocks. They get to invest it in their own stocks, which ends up driving their own prices up. So because all these people get their money first, they see the benefits before everybody else that gets the money last. So you think that the Federal Reserve is the only one creating debt? It's also the banks. So here's something that would get me so tight. When I first learned about this, I was so angry because I was like, what? The bank doesn't have my money? It's not safe in there? I thought this was like the safest thing because you know how people always say like, don't keep money in cash. Don't put money under your, Don't put money under your mattress. Don't leave money in your house. Like, it's not safe. Keep it in a bank. But if you really think about it, it's not safe at all. And let me tell you why. There's something called fractional reserve lending. When banks receive money, so if they receive money from me and you, they have the right to lend that money out to somebody else. So for example, say I have $1,000 and I wanna deposit it into Bank of America, right? What then happens is that Bank of America takes 90% of that money, so $900 of that money, and they lend it out to somebody else. So now, in actuality, I have $100 in my bank, but it shows me that I have $1,000. Once they lend out that money to somebody else, those $900, that person will deposit that money into another bank. And what happens is that that person will deposit there, and then the bank will do the same thing. They'll lend out that money to somebody else. And then that person will take that money and deposit it somewhere else. And then it keeps happening over and over and over and over again. This process will literally happen over and over again with money that doesn't actually exist. If too many people go at the same time to withdraw their money, the banks will collapse because they don't have our money. It just shows on the screen or on file that we have your money on deposit, but they don't actually have that money because they lent it out to so many different people. If banks fail, your money is gone unless they're bailed out by the government, which happens a lot actually. If a crisis happens, the banks have the right to freeze the money and even use it. In a lot of countries that happens a lot and you end up losing your money. So how is a bank safe when they're able to do all these things to your money? And on top of that, banks are closed on Sunday. You can't even send money if you wanted to. So now all this new money that's being added into the economy is being spread out, right? And as it's being spread out, there's still the same amount of goods and services. So that's why you will see that gas goes up, rent goes up, healthcare goes up, groceries go up, like you name it, it goes up. Now, the people that are affected by this are people like me and you, because people like me and you are not receiving wages faster than how inflation is going up. But the rich people are not affected by it as much because they already invested their money in assets that are appreciating. Remember how I said they get to invest in real estate and stocks? Yeah, they're fine. They're not going to be as affected by it than us. So your wage doesn't go up fast. Your paycheck ends up buying less than it did before. It just becomes a cycle of inflation and losing purchasing power. So now, as I explain all of this in our broken money system, now we have a form of money that cannot be inflated, it can be controlled, and it cannot be stopped. That form of money is called Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a form of digital money that exists on the internet. In comparison to dollars, Bitcoin cannot be manipulated the way that dollars are manipulated. Nobody can inflate it. Bitcoin is deflationary, which basically means that you can't produce more, so you can't inflate the supply the way that the Federal Reserve is able to inflate dollars. So in order to understand what makes Bitcoin a good money, you need to understand what makes it sound. Sound basically just means like what makes the money hold its value and why it can't be manipulated. So in order for a money to be sound, it needs to be scarce. And I'm going to compare this all to dollars, right? A money is sound when it's scarce. Bitcoin is scarce. This means that there will never be any more created. There are only 21 million Bitcoins that will ever be made. It's all written into the code that it can never be changed, deleted, or added. Like literally nobody could ever try to do that. And if they try to do that, it will automatically fail. Because Bitcoin can't be inflated, this causes its value to rise as demand increases. Because Bitcoin is deflationary, because it can't be inflated, its value will be driven up because more people want it. The Federal Reserve can print unlimited amounts of money. Remember how I said that they go on the computer and they just change the numbers around? And because the Treasury will always borrow money and sell IOUs and spend more than what they have, they will always borrow money. So the Federal Reserve will always print money. This is like an endless process forever and ever until the dollar collapses. Inflation is inevitable with dollars. it will always reduce the value of your money. Your dollars will always buy less than they did a year before, 5 years before, 10 years before. That's why $100 now feels like nothing compared to like 2015 or 2005. You could buy way more back then than you could 10 years ago or 5 years ago. 2, in order for a money to be sound, it has to be durable. Bitcoin can never, ever, ever be destroyed. Bitcoin literally exists on something called the blockchain. The blockchain is like a public record that everybody could see and nobody could delete. This thing is stored on thousands of computers called nodes worldwide that basically keep track of all the Bitcoin transactions that are ever made. So whenever someone sends Bitcoin, whenever someone receives Bitcoin, however much Bitcoin it is, how long the transaction took, all of that will be uploaded onto the blockchain that anybody could see. So if you want right now, you could see that. It's transparent. You could literally see it and it can't be deleted. And here's another criticism about Bitcoin, right? When I tell people that it's backed by those powerful computers, people will be like, oh, well, what if the internet shuts down? Well, if the internet shuts down, as soon as the internet comes up, Bitcoin, that blockchain will still be there. All the transactions that exist on the Bitcoin blockchain will always forever be there, and nobody could ever delete it. Bitcoin will continue to exist even if the internet shuts down. You know why? Because it could still exist from the connection to satellites. It could still exist through the connection of radio waves. It's a lot of really cool stuff that, like, the more you read into it, you're like, yo, like, how did somebody come up with this? This is kind of crazy. Dollars, on the other hand, are not durable. The reason why they're not durable is because, one, when they exist as physical cash, that cash can be destroyed. It could be eroded. Because dollars exist digitally as well, they're controlled by servers and banks. And if that bank gets hacked, if those servers get hacked, those dollars are gone. Those dollars are gone because they rely on a centralized server that's connected to one entity that controls it. So Bitcoin cannot be destroyed. Dollars can. Third, is this money portable? Can you carry it places? Can you send it anywhere in the world? Yes. Bitcoin can be sent anywhere in the world. You don't need to have a bank in order to have Bitcoin. All you need is something called a cold wallet, which is like, not like this, but think of like a USB, right? You put your money into that little device, and once you have that little device, you could take it anywhere with you, and that money will be on there forever. The only thing is that you need to memorize your key seed phrase, which is like your secret password. And even if you lose your device, as long as you know that key phrase, you could just put it into another cold wallet and you will have your money right there. You could send your Bitcoin at any time of the day, anywhere of the world, as long as you have a connection to the internet. That's fast, that's reliable, and it's convenient. With dollars, it's more risky to carry large amounts of cash because, one, you could get robbed, right? You could lose it. You will never get it back. You also can't just send money across the world right away. One, it's expensive. Two, it's kind of tedious. It takes forever. And you need permission from the bank. Like, with Bitcoin, you don't need permission to do these things. You just do it. So Bitcoin is instant, it's borderless, and dollars are slow and they require permission from a bank. The fourth quality of a sound money is divisibility. Can you send this in small amounts? Bitcoin can be broken down into smaller units just like dollars can. One Bitcoin is equal to 100 million Satoshis. That's basically the same thing as cents to dollars. So if you want to send a small amount of Bitcoin to somebody, you could do that right away. So it could be like 0.0000000000123, like literally like that, right? The smallest unit of a dollar is a cent, 0.01 cent. You can't break it down further than that. So Bitcoin is more divisible than a dollar. The fifth property of a sound money is fungibility. Is every unit the same? Luckily for Bitcoin, 1 Bitcoin will always equal 1 Bitcoin. It will be worth the same amount no matter where you are in the world. It doesn't matter where you are. It will always equal to 1 Bitcoin. Now, depending where you are in the world, your dollars can be confiscated. They could be tracked. They could be rejected if they're like deemed suspicious by a government or like an agency. If it exists digitally, it could be confiscated or even frozen. The sixth property is verifiability. I think I said it right. But basically, can you verify that this money is real? Like I said before, Bitcoin transactions exist on a public record called the blockchain or a public ledger. Anybody could verify that the Bitcoin people are sending back and forth is real. You don't need to have someone like a bank or a third party trusting that this thing is real because this blockchain is public. Anybody in the space of Bitcoin or anybody in the world could go into it and be like, is this real? Not literally like that, but they could check it and verify that it's real, and it's verified by millions of people around the world. That's what you call open source. Now with dollars, you have to trust your bank, the government, a third party that it's real. Cash could be counterfeited. The digital money could be replicated. They're just numbers in a database that you have to trust another entity to verify for you. You can't go and check it for yourself. Bitcoin is trustless. You don't need to trust somebody else. You could just trust the verification. You have to blindly trust the government or institution to verify your money. And it's not transparent. Like, you can't see what they're doing. 7, is this money censorship resistant? Can this money be controlled? Can it be blocked or confiscated? With Bitcoin, since no government or entity controls it, nobody could freeze it, nobody could take it from you, nobody could block it. Like, this is just a form of money that exists open and freely. No one can stop you from using it. You don't need nobody's permission. You can't have it blocked. Just like transactions with dollars can be blocked or confiscated. Banks and governments could block your money from being sent. They could freeze the money in your account. They could confiscate it. Like, it's just a lot of blind trust in centralized money and fiat money. Fiat basically is like government backed money. Bitcoin literally gives you full control of your money. You are your bank. You are the one verifying your money. You're not relying on somebody else or some other entity to tell you when to send it, how much you could send, who you could send it to. Like, you're the one, you become your bank. And that's what I want people to understand. When you are taking the journey into saving in Bitcoin, you become responsible for your money and your transactions with that money. Like, you're not relying on somebody else. And that could be very daunting to somebody that doesn't want to take that responsibility and that wants to rely on another person or another group to have that responsibility. Me personally, I feel much better knowing where my money goes, how much of it goes somewhere, where it's being verified. Like, I want to have responsibility for my money because it's my money. The last thing is that Bitcoin is decentralized. Bitcoin is maintained through powerful computers and miners that oversee the whole network of transactions. So when somebody sends Bitcoin or receives Bitcoin, that will get uploaded onto something called a block. Before that block gets uploaded, people need to do work. These people that I'm talking about are the people that are responsible for the Bitcoin network. They're the ones that maintain the network. These people have to do something called proof of work. You need to show your work in order to verify the transactions. So these people, okay, for example, I send you Bitcoin, right? That will then be sent to the blockchain. That information will be sent to the blockchain, right? A miner will receive that information, and before they could confirm that transaction, they have to solve a very hard cryptographic mathematical equation. And this is just by random selection. Once that miner finds the equation, the answer to that equation, then they will get rewarded for that for solving that transaction and get it paid in Bitcoin. Once that transaction is verified, it gets uploaded to the blockchain. So the transactions are then happening over and over and over and over again until they're verified and put on the blockchain. And then this happens over and over again. Now with dollars, you have to rely on the Federal Reserve. You have to rely on the Federal Reserve to make sure that our money supply exists and how much of it is there and how much of it's printed. And we don't see the way that they verify these things or the transparency in this process. With Bitcoin, we see this whole process because it's uploaded to the blockchain. So if you didn't understand anything that I've said, let me just review what Bitcoin does and how it fixes the problem of money. So Bitcoin removes governments and central banks from the equation. Nobody can print more Bitcoin, nobody can control it, and there will only ever be 21 million coins that exist ever, ever, ever. Bitcoin can't be printed or inflated, it can't be controlled by any government or person, and it can't be devalued. That's probably the most important part. Nobody in this world can ever create any more Bitcoin so that the Bitcoin that you do have can be devalued. If anything, the more people want more Bitcoin, the more people buy it, the more it goes up. So, recap. The US Treasury borrows money because they spend more than what they have. So they sell bonds to foreign governments, big banks, and the Federal Reserve through something called IOUs, which is just a promise saying, I will pay you back that money plus interest. The Federal Reserve then prints new money to buy these new bonds. And then that makes the money that you already have worth less. Banks then multiply this issue by lending out your money that you deposit in your bank account, and they do this over and over and over again with money that doesn't even exist. The new money that was already printed goes to the top 3 rich people, or the top 3 rich entities, which is the government, big banks and Wall Street, and corporations. They get to borrow it for a very minimal amount of money. They get to buy assets with this money. They get to get richer with this money. So then what ends up happening is that there's so much money in circulation, but there's still the same amount of goods and services. What ends up happening is that businesses have to drive their prices up in order to make a profit. Because there's still the same amount of goods and services that exist, they know that people are willing to pay more for the same amount of things. So that ends up driving prices up. People like you and me are not getting a raise every single year or every day or every month. So we cannot keep up with the prices of inflation going up. So that means gas, rent, groceries, healthcare, you name it, goes up. It feels like we can't maintain the same lifestyle we've been living. So it's like you're running on a treadmill and it feels like you're going 50 miles per hour, but you're really moving 1 mile per hour. By the time this new money reaches us, which it usually doesn't, the prices are already so high that we can't even keep up with the lifestyle. So the money in our pockets that we use to buy things that we usually buy don't buy the same amount of things because there's so much more money added to the system. Always remember, right? You have a pot of soup, you keep adding water to that soup. As you're adding water, the soup becomes flavorless. It becomes weaker. The seasoning becomes tasteless because you're diluting it. That's the same thing with your dollars. Imagine a big pool of money, this infinite amount of money. You keep adding more money to it. And the more money that you add to it, the less that money buys for you. So the money in your pocket buys less than it did a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you name it, it goes down. I really hope this made sense because I just tried to organize my thoughts because I tend to get excited and just say anything. But just remember, always remember, Bitcoin can't be inflated. There's only 21 million ever made. Nobody can delete it. Nobody can manipulate it. Nobody can confiscate it. Nobody can inflate it. So you will not have inflation with Bitcoin. You could break it down to smaller units. So you could send big payments. You could send large payments. You could own large amounts of Bitcoin. You could own small amounts of Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin cannot be hacked. You could store it anywhere as long as you know your key phrase to your cold wallet. Since nobody controls Bitcoin, you could send it anywhere in the world at any given time, and no bank or third party will tell you, hey, don't send that. There's a withdrawal, there's a limit to that, or there's this really high fee. Like, no, you're responsible, you're your bank. And yeah, I really hope this made sense. I think the more I talk about it in person or verbally, the better it'll make sense to people, because I just tend to tweet about it. But yeah, that's my video on appreciating the solution once you understand the problem, which is our broken money system. If you liked the video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And I really hope this made sense. If it didn't make sense, that's okay. I didn't understand it the first time. You just gotta keep watching videos over and over and over again until you understand it. But yeah, I'm gonna leave a link of a playlist of where to start to understand Bitcoin. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Peace.